ממון, sipurei masios, 12th story, part 3. Clash is called speaking with שאני, ושתזכו, עצמיכם, הרבה כולם לעולם, שמחה וממון, תמיד עשינו מזמין בית ובשתש ובשבש ובסיבלש ובשלנו. נחמו מיומון. Now, the aforementioned country that is the wealthy land for whom money was the main object, etc., as mentioned, continued to occupy themselves with the devotions, that is, they kept doing wild things and offering sacrifices to their gods, that is, to those who had much money, as mentioned, and the time that the warrior had given them additionally was already beginning to tangibly run out. They were very frightened, and they did their devotions and offered sacrifices and incense, and involved themselves in their prayers, which they prayed to their gods. They caught a little critter, that is such a person who has little money, and offered him for a sacrifice to their gods, and it remained their opinion that they must perform their first plan, which they had been given, that they should send to the country where they are all gods there, because they have very extraordinary riches there, which according to their opinions entails that they are all gods, and that country would certainly save them, since they are all gods. After all, as mentioned, they did so, and they sent emissaries there to that country. Meanwhile, on the way, as the emissaries were going, they went astray, and they discerned a man walking with the stick, whose stick came to more than all their gods, that is, his stick was set with very expensive diamonds, so that the stick was worth more than the riches of all their gods. Should one put together all the riches of the gods, and even of the gods of that country they're going to, the stick would be worth more than all their riches. Furthermore, the man was walking with the hat in which there were diamonds, so that the hat was also worth extraordinarily much. As soon as the emissaries noticed this man, they immediately fell down before him in kneeling and prostration, that is, they bowed profusely before him, because according to the foolish opinion, this man is a god over all gods, for he has such extraordinarily great riches as this man, and this man whom they encountered was the king's treasurer mentioned above. The man said to them, "This here is a novelty for you. Come with me, I will show you riches." He led them atop the mountain where the king's treasury was laid out in order, and he showed them the treasure. As soon as they saw the treasure, they immediately fell down with bowing and prostration, because he is, after all, a god over all gods, according to their foolish and deluded opinion. As for them, the essence of creed, belief, faith, emunah was money, is mentioned, albeit they brought no sacrifices for him in accordance with the belief that he is such a god, etc. They certainly would have offered themselves to him. However, when these emissaries went out, the emissaries were warned that on the way they should offer no sacrifices, for they were afraid that should they want to offer sacrifices along the way, none of them would remain, for maybe one of them will find a treasure on the road, maybe one of them will enter an outhouse and find a treasure there. Hebrew only, an outhouse, and find a treasure there. Hebrew only, which would be a god for him. He will want to sacrifice himself to it, and none of them will remain there, for the country warned the emissaries that on the way they should offer no sacrifices whatsoever. Hebrew only, therefore these emissaries did not offer sacrifices to this aforementioned warden, but this was clear for them that he was a god over all gods, since he possessed such astounding and vast wealth. The emissaries came to the decision why should they any longer go to those other gods, that is, to the country they were sent to, where they are greatly wealthy people whom they consider to be gods. Isn't it better? Isn't it better that this man will surely be able to better help them, for he is after all a god over all of them, according to their crazed notion, since he has such extraordinary great riches, more than them all, many times over. Therefore they beseech this man that he should go with them into their country. He was amenable with them, and went with them and entered their country. There was a great celebration in the country that they had acquired such a god, for they were already sure now that through him they would have a deliverance, for he is such a god, since he has after all such good fortune. The man who was the king's treasurer, as mentioned, who was accepted by the countrymen as God, who was accepted by the countrymen as God ordered that until there would be a proper order in the country, no one in the meantime should offer any sacrifices, for this warden was in fact a great tzaddik, for he was of the king's people, who were all very great tzaddikim. The warden certainly loathed the foolish practices of the country, but he was still incapable of leading them out of their evil way. However, for the time being, he ordered them that in any case no sacrifices should be brought. On the countrymen started to beseech him regarding that aforementioned warrior, of whom they were very terrified, and the warden also replied to them, could this be the warrior whom he knows? Could this be the warrior whom he knows? The warden got up and went out to the warrior and asked the warrior's people if it were possible to be seen by him, and they said they would announce it. They would ask permission, they would announce it. They announced it as permission. He ordered for him to be led, and the warden entered before the warrior. They recognized each other, and there was celebration and crying between them as above. That is, they were very happy that they were privileged to find each other, but still wept very much. How can the rest of the aforementioned people be brought as well? The warrior spoke up to the warden. Our kosher prayer leader is also here, and I have already seen him, and he has already become a king. Hebrew only, and they told each other how it had evolved that they arrived here. The treasurer told the warden that he had passed by everyone, that is, by the king's place and all the aforementioned peoples. Only by the two of them he did not pass. Only by the two of them did he not pass. That is, by the place of the prayer leader and the warrior he did not pass. The warden talked with the warrior about the country that has become so errant and so deluded in money that they have fallen into such nonsense. The warrior answered the warden that which he had told the prayer leader, that he had heard from the king that whoever has fallen into the craving of money cannot be taken out of it by any means except by that way. As mentioned, again they extended time. That is, the warden convinced the warrior that he should give the country yet another day. The warrior gave them another day. Then they made signals between themselves, the warden and the warrior, and the warden went away from the warrior and returned to that country. Now the warden certainly kept rebuking them severely over the evil way in which they had become so abased in craving money, but he could not lead them out of it. Since they were already very deep rooted in it. But nonetheless, since the prayer leader and the warden had talked with them very much, they had already become a little confused and kept saying Adrabah, just the reverse, on the contrary, on the opposite, take us out of it, even though they still held themselves fast in their foolish notion and did not want to get out of their nonsense at all. Nevertheless, they kept saying when they were rebuked, Adrabah, on the contrary, if it is indeed so that we are mistaken, please please not take us out. Please take us out of our error. Please take us out of our error. Take us out of our error. The warden replied to them, I will give you a suggestion against the warrior. I know the warrior's power and from where he gets his strength, and he told them the matter of the sword mentioned above, from where the warrior gets his strength. Therefore I will go with you to the place of the sword, and by this you will be able to stand up against the warrior, for you will also get strength from there. And the warden's intention was, when they arrive at the sword place, they will already be out from their money craving, for by means of that way to the sword, thereby a person gets out of the money craving. As mentioned, the country accepted his advice and sent their magnates who were gods for them, and they went together with the warden to the sword, and the gods, that is, their magnates who went with the warden, certainly went dressed in gold and silver jewelry, since this was the main thing for them. So they went together, the warden and the country's magnates, whom they called gods. The warden made the thing known to the warrior, inasmuch as he is going with them to seek the place of the sword, and his intention is maybe he will be privileged on the way to find the king and his people. The warrior replied, I too will go with you. The warrior disguised himself so that the people going with the warden should not know that he himself is the warrior, and also went with the warden. They decided, the warden and the warrior, they would inform the prayer leader of this as well. They informed him, and the prayer leader replied to him, And the prayer leader replied, he will also go with them. The prayer leader went to them, and the prayer leader ordered his people before he went away that they should pray about this, that Hashem's blessed God should make their venture successful, that they should be privileged to find the king and his people. For the prayer leader had always kept praying about this, that the king and his people should be found, and always kept ordering his people that they should also pray about this. And he had composed prayers for them, which they should pray for this. And now that he wanted to go to the warden with the warden and the warriors, so that they should go together to search for the king and his people, he urged them even more to pray for it constantly, that they should be privileged to find them. Their prayer leader came to the warden and the warrior, and there was certainly great rejoicing among them, celebration and weeping as before they all three went together. That is the warden, the warrior, and the prayer leader, with the gods, that is the country's magnates, who were called gods in their country, going with them. They went, and they came to a certain country, and there were guards there standing around the country. They asked the sentries, what sort of country is this, and who is your king? The guards replied, inasmuch as when there was a storm wind, at which time the world became separated into numerous fractions, that is, into many opinions, as each sect had a different opinion as mentioned. Then the people of the country chose for themselves that the main thing is wisdom, and they took up for themselves a great sage as a king. That long ago they found quite an exception. Not long ago they found quite an exceptionally great wise man, who was strangely and extraordinarily great sage. The king relinquished the kingship to him, and they took him up as king, since for them the main thing is wisdom. The three of them said, that is the warrior and the prayer leader, that it appears that this must be our sage, that is the king's sage. They asked if it were possible to be seen by him, and they answered them, it must be announced. We must ask permission. They went and announced, and he ordered them to come, and they, that is the three of them, entered into the sage who had become king in the country. They recognized each other, for the sage was indeed the king sage mentioned earlier. There was certainly great celebration there, rejoicing and weeping, for they wept how to be privileged to find the king and the others as well. They asked the sage if he knows anything about the king's hand. He answered them, he answered them that the hand is with him, but since the time that they had become dispersed by the storm wind, from that time onward, he does not want to gaze at the hand at all, because the hand belongs exclusively, because the hand belongs exclusively because the hand belongs exclusively to the king. Albeit he had carved out the hand's form on a stone in order to use it a little for his thing, i.e. wisdom, but upon the hand itself he doesn't look at all. They discussed with the sage how he had come here, and he told them that since the time the storm wind happened, he went where he would go, and as he went he passed by everyone, Hebrew only of the king's people. Hebrew only of the king's people, only by the three of them. That is by the place of the prayer leader, the warrior, and the warden. He did not pass by until the country found him and took him up as a king. And now, in the meantime, he must guide them according to the way, according to their sophistries, until later he will lead them out to the proper truth. They talked with the sage regarding that country that had become so deluded about money, etc. And they said, if we had been thrown around and dispersed for nothing more than on account of that country, in order that we should correct them and turn them to the truth, it would also be worth it, for they have become so deluded. Because the truth, all the aforementioned factions, each one having chosen its nonsense, this one wanting honor, and this one murder, etc. They have all become deluded and need to be led out to the proper goal, because even the sect that had chosen for itself that the main thing is wisdom, they too have not reached the true purpose and also need to be led out from that, for they have attached to alien and heretical wisdoms. Albeit it is easier to bring people out from all the follies, but these ones are so deluded in the idolism of money so deluded in the idolism of money, and are so fallen into it that it is impossible to extract them from it. And the sage also replied to them that he too had heard from the king that it is possible to extract someone who has fallen into any craving, but from the craving of money it is impossible to extract, other than by the way that there is to the sword. As mentioned, the sage said he too would go with them, and they all four went along, and the gods, that is the wealthy ones of the country, went with them too. They came to a certain country, and they also asked the watchmen, what sort of country is this, and who is your king? They answered them, inasmuch as when the storm wind occurred, then the people of this country chose for themselves that the main purpose is speech. They took up an eloquent talker as a king. Later they found quite a superb eloquent bard and orator. They accepted him as a king. Quite a superb eloquent bard and orator. They accepted him as a king, because the king relinquished the kingdom to him because he is so eloquent. They realized this must surely be our king's orator. This must surely be our king's orator. They also asked if it were possible to be seen by the king. They answered them, we must announce it. They announced it, and he ordered that they should come in, and he ordered that they should come in. They entered to the king, and that was the king's orator. They recognized each other, and there was also great rejoicing and weeping between them. The orator also went with them as well, and they went further in search. Maybe they would find the rest of them, for they saw that Hashem is Borach, God, blessed be He, is helping them, that they repeatedly find the friends, and they attributed all this to the merit of the kosher prayer leader who was always praying for this, and through his prayers they were privileged to always find the friends. They went onward, maybe they will find the rest. In addition, they went along, and they came to a certain country, and they also asked, what sort of country is this, and who is your king? They answered them that they are of the faction that had chosen for itself that the main goal is to go drunk, to get drunk, to go drunk, and be happy. They had taken up for themselves some drunkard as a king, because he is always happy. But later they found a man sitting in an ocean of wine, and he pleased them very much more, because this is certainly a very big drunkard, for he's seated in a sea of wine. They took him up as a king. They also asked to interview with him, to meet with him, and the guards went and announced it. They entered to the king, and this was the king's faithful friend who had been sitting in the sea of wine that had come about from the talk of the orator who consoles them is mentioned, and the countrymen reason that he is a great drunk since he sits in the sea of wine. So they took him up as a king. When they entered to him, they recognized each other, and between them there was a great rejoicing and weeping as before, and the faithful friend went with them as well. They went onward and came to a certain country. They asked the watchman, who is your king? They answered that the king is a beautiful woman insofar as she leads to the goal, because the goal is habitation of the world, that is that the world should be inhabited with people, is mentioned. And initially they had a beautiful woman as a queen, that they found a beauty who is a very exceptional beauty, and they accepted her as a queen, and they accepted her as a queen. They realized this must surely be the queen's daughter. They also asked to interview with her, and they went and announced, and they entered to the queen and recognized that this is the queen's daughter herself, and the rejoicing that was there is certainly unimaginable. They asked, how have you come here? She told them that after the storm wind happened and had snatched away the dear boy child out of the cribs, mentioned he immediately in that frantic moment she ran after the child but did not find him. The milk pressured her, and from this the sea of milk came about, and the country found her and accepted her as king over them, and there was a great celebration there. But they also wept severely over the dear boy child who was not there, and over her father and mother whom she, the queen's daughter, doesn't know about. But now already the country has a king too, because already here is the husband of the queen's daughter who has become queen here, for the warrior himself is her husband. So now the country has a king. The queen's daughter asked the prayer leader for the time being to go in her country and meanwhile cleanse of their repulsive vice. and meanwhile cleansed of the repulsive vibes, because since for them the main purpose was a beautiful woman, they were certainly very defiled and deep in this lust, very defiled and deep in this lust. Therefore she asked the prayer leader to meanwhile go cleanse them of it a little in the meantime. That is, he should he should tell the Musar guidance and prescriptions for practical living, so that they should not be so deep in this craving of promiscuity, so that they should not be so crude in the spice, because beyond it being a craving, it was additionally for them just like a creed, a belief, a faith, and a munah that is the goal, because all of the factions that had each chosen its bad thing as a purpose as mentioned for each of them, the thing was just as a creed, a faith, a belief, and a munah that this is the true purpose, that this is the purpose, that this is the purpose. Therefore she asked the prayer leader to go and cleanse them a little in the meantime. Then they all went searching for the rest. They went along and they came to a certain country, and they also inquired, who is your king? They answered them that their king is a 1-year-old. They answered them that their king is a 1-year-old. For they are from the faction that had chosen for themselves that whoever has an abundance of food and is not nourished from what other people eat, he deserves to be a king. They temporarily accepted a wealthy man as king. Then they found a man who was sitting in a sea of milk, and they were very pleased by him, because this man was nourished his whole life from milk and was not nourished from what other people eat. Therefore they took him up as a king, and for that reason he is called a Ben Shaddai, 1-year-old. 1-year-old, since he lives on milk like a 1-year-old. They realized that this is surely their child. They requested to interview with him, and they went and announced they entered to him, and they recognized each other, for he also recognized them, even though he was only a little child when he was snatched away. Nevertheless, because he was a mature sage since his birth, since he was born with complete wisdom as mentioned, therefore he with complete wisdom as mentioned, therefore he recognized them, and they of course recognized him. There was certainly a very great celebration there, albeit they still wept that they did not know of the king and the queen, and they asked him, how did you get here? He told them that when the storm wind had snatched him away, it carried him away where it carried him, and he was there in that place and sustained himself with what he found there until he came to the sea of milk. He understood this, he was certainly made from his mother's milk, for the milk certainly pressured her, and that is how the sea came about. He settled there on the sea of milk and was nourished by the milk until these countrymen came and took him up as a king. Then they went onward and came to a country, and they asked, who is your king? And they replied that they had chosen for themselves that murder is the goal. They accepted a certain murderer as king. Then they found a woman. Then they found a woman sitting in a sea of blood, so they took her up as a king, because they saw that she is surely a very great murderer, since she is seated since she is seated in an ocean of blood. They also asked to interview with her, and they went and announced. They entered to her, and this was the aforementioned queen who keeps crying constantly, and her tears come to be. The sea of blood is mentioned. They recognized each other, and there was certainly a very great celebration there. Albeit they still wept that they still did not know about the king. They went onward and came to a certain country. They asked, who was your king? They replied that they had chosen for themselves as the king a certain honorable person, that is a person who has honor is mentioned, because for them the main purpose is honor. Then they found sitting in the field an old man wearing a crown on his head. They were extremely pleased by him, for he is a dignitary, for he sits in a field adorned with the crown, and they accepted him, and they accepted him as king. They realized that this is certainly their king himself, and they also asked if it were possible to be seen by him. They went and announced, and they answered to him and recognized that he is the king himself, and the rejoicing that was there is certainly inconceivable in the brain, and the rejoicing that was there is certainly inconceivable in the brain. And the foolish gods, that is the very wealthy ones from the land of riches, who entered them are traveling with them, and they do not know whatsoever for their lives what is happening here, why there is such happiness here. And now the entire holy group was restored and gathered together, united. That is the king and the holy people, they sent the prayer leaders to all the countries, that is the countries of all the factions that had each chosen for itself a bad thing, as the goal is mentioned, to correct them and cleanse them, to lead them out of their error, each country out of its vice and its nonsense, for they had all become deluded. As mentioned above, now the prayer leader certainly had the power to go to them and turn them around to the right way, for he had received power and permission from the kings of all the land, since here were all their kings as mentioned, because the king and his people who had come together, they all were the kings of all the lands of the factions mentioned above. The prayer leader went with their power to cleanse them and bring them back in tshuva, repentance, while the warrior spoke to the king regarding the country that it is so fallen into the idolism of money. The warrior said to the king, I heard from you that through the way that I have to the sword, through it is possible to extract someone who has fallen in the idolism of money. The king in the idolism of money, and the king answered him, yes, it is so. The king told the warrior the thing just how, through that way one can take them out of the craving of money, inasmuch as on the way where he goes to the sword there is a way on the side. By this way one comes to a fiery mountain, and on this mountain crouches the lion, and the lion when he needs to eat goes and falls on the flocks and takes for himself sheep and cattle and eats them up, and the shepherds know of this and guard their sheep intensely from him, yet the lion does not look at this whatsoever. Just whenever he wants to eat, he falls on the flocks, and the shepherds bang and strike and storm at him. However, the lion does not hear this at all. He just takes sheep and cattle for himself and roars and eats them, and the mountain of fire is entirely invisible. In other words, there is a mountain of fire, only one doesn't see it, and moreover from the side there is yet another way. With this way one comes to a place called kitchen, and in that kitchen there are all sorts of food, and in the kitchen there is no fire whatsoever, rather the foods are cooked. Rather the foods are cooked by way of the fiery mountain mentioned above, and the fiery mountain is very far from there. And there in that kitchen there are all sorts of food, and in the kitchen there is no fire whatsoever, rather the foods are cooked by way of the fiery mountain mentioned above, and the fiery mountain is very far from there, but channels and pipes go from the fiery mountain to the kitchen, and thereby all the foods are cooked, and the kitchen too is not at all seen, but there is a sign. Standing there are birds upon the kitchen, and by them hovering over them, flying over them, standing there are birds upon the kitchen, and by them one knows that the kitchen is there. Standing there are birds upon the kitchen, and by them one knows that the kitchen is there, and the birds hover with their wings, and thereby they kindle the fire and put out the fire that is by the birds flapping. They blow on and inflame the fire, and also by their very flapping they put out the fire, so that the fire should not flame too strongly more than necessary, and they blow on the fire according to what is necessary for the foods. That is, for one food is needed such a fire, and for another food is needed a different fire, all according to the food. So do the birds blow on the fire. All this the king tells the warrior, therefore lead them, that is these people from the land of riches who are gods there, first against the wind, so that the smell of the food should get to them. Then when you give them from the foods, they will definitely just surely cast away the craving of money. The warrior did so and took these people, that is the magnates from the land of riches who are gods in the country, who came here with the warden as mentioned. Now when they left their country with the treasurer, the countrymen gave them power that whatever they do shall be done, and the whole country must abide by whatever. And the whole country must abide by whatever they do. The warrior took the people and led them on the way which the king told him, as mentioned, and he brought them up until the kitchen where the foods are. And first he led them against the wind, and the smell of the foods went to them, and they began to beg him intensely to give them from these good foods. Then he led them away from the wind, and they began to scream, there is such a tremendous stench, there is such a tremendous stench. There is such a tremendous stench. He again brought them against the wind, and again the good smell of the foods reached them, and again they begged intensely that he should give them from the foods. Then he again led them away from the wind, and they again began to scream, it stinks unbelievably, literally, very wildly, it stinks very wildly. The warrior responded to them, don't you see that there is nothing whatsoever here that should have a bad smell? It must certainly be that you yourselves make the stench, for here there is nothing. You yourselves make the stench, you yourselves stink. That you yourselves make the stench, you yourselves stink, for here there is nothing that should have a bad smell. Then he gave them from the foods. As soon as they ate of these foods, they immediately began to cast away from themselves their money, and each one dug for himself a grave, buried himself in the pit due to the great disgrace, as they were intensely ashamed, for they felt that money stinks intensely, evil only which smells like actual feces, because they had tasted of the food, and they scratched their faces and buried themselves and could not lift their faces at all, and each one was ashamed in front of the other, because such is the special power, segula, of the food, that whoever eats of the food is very repulsed by money, because there in that place money is the greatest disgrace of all disgraces. And when someone wants to say something derogatory about another, literally throws something out at another, he throws out at him, you have money, haha. For money there is a huge disgrace, and the more money someone has, the more he is ashamed. Therefore they buried themselves out of great disgrace, and each of them wasn't able to lift his face even in front of the other, even more so in front of the warrior. And whoever still found with himself some gilden or grush, a small coin, gilden or grush, would rid himself of it immediately and throw it away from himself. Then the warrior came to them and took them out of the pits that they had dug for themselves there, out of disgrace, and he said to them, come with me, because now you need no longer have any fear of the warrior, for I myself am the warrior. They begged the warrior to give them from the foods to bring to their country, because they themselves would surely just hate money. However, they wanted the whole country to go out from this money craving. The warrior gave them from these foods, and they brought the foods into their country, and as soon as they gave them from these foods, they all immediately began to cast away the money and buried themselves in the earth out of disgrace. And the very wealthy and the gods were most ashamed, and the very wealthy and the gods were most ashamed, but even the lesser people who were called animals and birds by them were also ashamed for having been so little until now in their own eyes, because they had the money, because now they knew that on the contrary it's just the reverse. Money is the main disgrace, for these foods have such an effect that whoever eats from the foods is very repulsed by money, for he feels the bad smell of money just like feces exactly. They all cast away the money and their gold and silver. Then they sent them the prayer leader, and he gave them true ways to make amends and return to God, and tikkunim, repairs, remedies, and he cleansed them, and the king became king, over the entire world. And the king became king over the entire world, and the entire world returned to God, blessed be he. And they all were involved only in Torah, prayer, teshuva, and good deeds. Only in Torah, prayer, teshuva, and good deeds, amen. So be his will, blessed is Hashem for eternity. Amen, so be his will, blessed is Hashem for eternity, amen and amen. And notes following the story, the verse states that Hashem is full of God's God, blessed be he, has an oven in one place and fire in a different place, distant from the oven, as written, Hashem, asher Eloi b'tzion v'tan Eloi b'Yishalayim, says Hashem, whose fire is in Sion and his furnace in Yerushalayim. See there the entire chapter which speaks of this whole story. Hoi ha-yodim Mitzrayim, the Ezra al-Susim Yisho'enu. Woe to those who descend to Egypt for assistance and rely on horses. In Mitzrayim, Adam v'loi Kael, v'suseihem basa v'loi ruach. The Egyptians are men and not God, and their horses flesh and not spirit, alluding to the country that the land of riches relied on to save them. For according to the mistaken beliefs, they consider them all gods and their horses angels, as explained above in the story. See there, this is why the verse concludes in Mitzrayim, Adam v'loi Kael, v'suseihem basa v'loi. The Apostolics understand this. Nanach nachmo nachma miyuman, nanach nachmo nachma miyuman, nanach nachmo miyuman. Nanach nachmo nachmo miyuman nanach nachmo miyuman Hashem yata yodoi v'chushal oize Hashem yata yudoi v'chushal Hashem yata yuda v'chushal oize v'nufal uzi v'yachta kilam yichlayin. So when Hashem shall stretch out his hand, both he that helped shall stumble, and he that was helped shall fall. They shall all perish together, alluding to the hand. For on the hand they saw that both together would perish, the helper and the helped, as mentioned. Kasha yege hu arye v'hakfi atapoy, asher yikurei ulabelo yiroyim v'chilei kitzipurim afois. Nanach nachmu nachmu meyuman, like as the lion or the young lion growling over his prey. Though a band of shepherds be called forth against him, etc. And Katsipoidim up voice of flying birds, alluding to the lion and the birds mentioned. Take a good look above inside the story and understand. Ki bayoyme hiya masin isha lile kasboy ve'elile zahavoi v'chilei. Nanach nachmu nachman miyuman. For on that day each man will detest his silver idols and gold idols, etc. V'nufal ashir b'cherev lo'ish v'chilei v'las loy mipnei cherev v'chilei v'salim v'mugo yavoy v'chilei. And the seer shall fall by the sword, not of man, and shall flee from the sword, and his rock shall disappear from fear, alluding to the three powers of the sword in the story. V'nofel and the Nas allude to the two of the powers, and the Sol and the Saloi Mamuga Yavoy, the Saloi Mamuga Yavoy alludes to the illness of Dar, alludes to the illness of Dar, alludes to the illness of Dar, who where one strength and power wither and disappear. The Saloi refers to their strength. This alludes to the third power of the sword. Take a good look and understand. Then the verse concludes, Ne'um Hashem asheloi b'tzion, asheloi ir b'tzion, asher ur loi b'tzion, asher ur loi b'tzion, v'tana loi b'dishalayim. These are the furnace and the fire in the story. Look and see and understand how this chapter explains the entire story. All the above were the Rebbe's words. Nanach nachmo nachmo meyuman, and thus said the Rebbe explicitly, Nanach nachmo nachmo meyuman, that the entire story from beginning to end is alluded to in entirety in this chapter, i.e. Isaiah 31. And he said that all the words of the story can be found in the scriptures and so forth, but the essence of the story is all stated in the above chapter, for there it is all explained and alluded to entirely. However, we do not know how, beyond what the Rebbe Nanach nachmo nachmo meyuman revealed to us explicitly. That is what is explained above. Albeit the rest of the matters of the story we were not privileged to perceive how they are hinted in that chapter. However, he stated explicitly that the entire story is alluded to there. For instance, b'meisem SCP psilai chas pechul v'es afilis masechasehu bechul tizei tumoy duvu say toim aloi. You shall defile your graven images overlaid with silver, and the adornment of your gold molten image. You shall put them far away as an unclean thing. Go away, you shall say to it. I bid 30:22, and as written, Bayoimahu. Nanach nachmo yoimahi yashlechu udam eselile kasboy veselile zahabe v'chilai lach boy peiros v'chilai levoy b'nikrois chatzirem. Nanach nachmo meyuman, on that day a man will cast away his gods of silver and his gods of gold, digging ditches to go into the clefts of rocks. That is, they will cast away the craving of money, which is actual idolatry, and bury themselves in ditches, etc., as explained in this story, because money stinks like actual feces, as written, Tizayin kamoidav, you will put them far away as an unclean thing. Say, go away, akin to soya feces, toimuloy, you should say to it, and so forth. One can find all the words of the story. Nanach nachmo nachmo meyuman, and so forth. One can find all the words of the story in the scriptures, etc. Nanach nachmo nachmo meyuman. The order of the king and his men is as follows: the prayer leader and the warrior, the prayer leader and the warrior, the treasurer and the sage, the orator and the faithful friend, the queen's daughter and her child, the king and the queen, that is the order, and they correspond to Olam Atikul in the world of repair, and they are 10 things, but they are not reckoned in order, that is, these 10 are not reckoned according to the order explained in books of Kabbalah, but there are hidden things behind this. It is also explained in the books that when the influx of one attribute passes through another attribute, when the influx tarries there, then it is named after that attribute, that is the attribute which is tarrying. The influx of another attribute that is passing through it, that attribute is named after the attribute from which the influx is coming, and because of this the order here is changed. There are also other matters in this which will be very clear to those who are adept in the books. The Rebbe Zal said all this explicitly. I also understood from his words that Misas HaMalachim, death of the king, shattering of the pre-creation spheres, and the repair is alluded to in the story, although neither the aspect of the destruction of the temple, destruction, they're breaking, the death of the king, the shouting of the pre-creation spheres, the destruction of the temple, nor the aspect of its rebuilding are mentioned as the order of the 10 aspects mentioned for the same reasons above, but still the things are hidden and sealed. But still, the things are hidden and sealed because the utmost secrets of the story he did not reveal at all. He only enlightened our eyes with the verses and ideas above, so that we should know that there are very great and awesome hidden secrets in the story, but we do not know the extent. Fortunate is one who is privileged to understand a bit of the secrets. Fortunate is one who is privileged to understand a bit of the secrets of these stories explained in this book, because they are all extremely wondrous and awesome novelties. Deep, who could find it out? Ma noima, ma nadaber, what shall we say, what shall we speak? Mi shamo, kazois mi ro'o ka'ela, who has heard such a thing, who has seen such things? Till 13 the 7 beggars. Introduction: I will tell you how happy people once were. I will tell you how happy people once were. I will tell you how happy people once were. The real thing is, I'll tell you once how people from the sadness, from the dark marsh became happy.